How's it going, everybody? And I'm going to be doing a little bit of a different video today. Normally I go and do tech support Thursday. Well, I'm trying to do them more frequently, and I release on a Thursday. But this particular person left several comments on the same video, and so rather than to respond to them individually, I figured and leave like paragraph long responses. I figured I would just verbally respond to them. Bang questions that I get commonly on the exam or on the channel that I figured are worth worth putting a little bit of effort into in a video. So hopefully that resonates and answers some questions. So I'll start from the bottom and work my way up. So may I please know? So I see J.K. Roll. I don't know if that has anything to do with. Is it J.K. Rowling? He's the author for Game of Thrones. Or is it? No. Author for Harry Potter. Yeah, J.K. Rowling. Okay. So I don't know if this is a play on that, but so it's like, may I please know why do you need 4 to 5 servers? The short answer is, in my previous job, I was a solutions integration architect, or an SIA, working for a third-party integrator, and I had several customers that I would be working on at the exact same time for their projects. And a lot of their projects required me, I was the deployment engineer, and I would help. The solution was already sold to the customer. It was my job to figure out how to make it work. So a lot of the servers that I had were Eve bare metal installs, so that I could run. I did a lot of Nexus 9K, Nexus 9000 series deployments, whether it was VXLAN, routing, some sort of switch deployment, VPC configurations, that type of stuff. So a lot of it came down to needing basically a server per customer. So I was attached to 3 different customers on a regular basis. One every week I would be working with, and then there were probably a dozen, if not more, that I would cycle in and out of depending on how busy they were and things like that, or I would just get a new project assigned to me for easy stuff. So that was the reason why I had so many servers. And over time, I would go buy a new server because I needed the capacity for one reason or another. And so that's why I ended up buying them. So as of right now, I'm going off memory here, I've got 2 Dell R810s. Each one of those has 4 10-core CPUs. I forget the CPU number off the top of my head, because they're running as Eve Pro bare metal installs, so I don't get to log into ESXi and get the CPU info. But I've got 2 of those. I have an older Cisco C220 that I was using, also Eve bare metal install that was my dedicated customer that I worked with every week. I had their entire environment built out in Eve bare metal, and because I was working with them extensively, so I needed 6, 7, 8, more than half a dozen efforts at any one point in time. So I was always busy with them. So that was a dedicated server. The other 2 were for bigger projects that I was working on, and then I have a Cisco C240 M5. And that one's ESXi installed for me to run ESXi 8 and NSX. So a lot of the NSX customers I was working with, I would be demoing stuff in, I had my own sandbox. So I had a fully built out environment. I had a license, the whole 9 yards, and I would work with customers on their deployments for doing, basically anything route switch, some firewall stuff. I would test firewall rules out ahead of time to see if things were going to work. Stuff like that. So a lot of what I had servers for were for the customer projects that I was working on. So that was the main driver for having 4 or 5 servers. Now I've got 3 running currently. So I've got one is my ESXi server, which is running, but there's really no load on it. and then I've got two other ones. The two Dells are still running, and they are they're both Eve Pro installs, bare metal, and one is running my enterprise stuff, so my enterprise lab and the enterprise workbook, and then the other one is running my service provider um, workbook and my service provider content that I'm going to be once I get done with the workbook. So that is the reason for that. So it's there's always something involved that requires some effort. I loved your CCI SP Lab experience. May you please make a long video on your SP track journey, how much time it took you, etc. So service provider is a whole nother animal from routing and switching or enterprise infrastructure. So a much greater focus is put on BGP, and you've got two different operating systems to learn versus just one. So I was already pretty well versed with iOS and XE from all my route switch prep. So moving over to service provider, I didn't work for a service provider at the time. I worked with a service provider, so we were like third party. So there was a team of us. I think there was 5 or 6 CCIEs that would work on the service provider environment. Between all the call manager for all their voice stuff going on, plus all their routing and switching needs and things like that. I got really involved with their layer 2 VPN deployments, so we did a lot of VPLS, transparent layer 2 services, things like that. A lot of wireline service, things like that. So the SP stuff was because I had already spent so much time in MPLS already. I felt like I already knew it pretty well. Little did I realize that MPLS that I had learned was like 5% of what you can do with MPLS. So it took a long time. So I passed the lab in 2015. I started studying for my NP and service provider 6 months after that, maybe. And then I got my NP and service provider over the course of, 6 months, maybe 8 months, something like that. And I know it was challenging once I got outside of my comfort zone, and like getting into QoS and advanced capabilities and stuff like that I hadn't spent as much time on. So about that same point in time, I knew Service Provider version 4 had come out, and that's when Nick Russo's book had dropped. I bought the book, and I figured, oh, perfect. Here's my how do I put it? Here's my cheat sheet, if you will, for the exam. So I started going through his book, and I realized very quickly, probably, I can't even tell you exactly where it clicked with me, that I was going to need to spend a lot more time in service provider than I thought I was going to. I had greatly underestimated the exam because I thought I had done the same thing for CCNP. I failed a couple exams when I took that for route switch and T-shoot. I failed route, I failed T-shoot. So for me, taking route switch, it was like once I passed the lab and I had my IE, I had I'm an expert already, so this should be easy mentality. And I knew that wasn't 100% true, but it was still to a certain extent a mindset to where, like, I've already done it once, it shouldn't be that hard to do it again. And even though it's I don't want to say the never quit attitude, but it was just like, how could I fail? I've already done this. So it's like once you've already getting the first one is always the hardest. The first time in anything that the first time you do something in any particular thing that you're going to go do, I don't care what it is, you can, be the first time you hit a baseball or the first time you kiss a girl, there's that first time experience for everything. I was like, well, the first one is always the hardest. So I figured number 2 should be pretty easy, right? Well, I severely underestimated that. I did go take the lab in 2019, November 8th. These are dates that will always stick out in my mind. November 8th, 2019. I sat for the lab in Richardson, Texas. First time I'd ever been to Texas, by the way. And I was in. It was still the route. It was still the T-shoot diagnostics and config section, and I realized in T-shoot that I had drastically underprepared. Drastically, like I literally should have just, packed my stuff up and walked out of the building and apologized to the proctor for wasting his time. But I was already there, and I figured, you know what? I'm just gonna go deal with it. Now the problem that I had was at the time was Cisco had come out in 2019 at Cisco Live and revamped their certification portfolio, which ironically was the main theme, if you will, of Cisco Live 2019 was not a new product or a new service, but a sort of revamp of the certification portfolio, which I thought was kind of funny. It's like, wow, that all that for Cisco Live. Way to go, Cisco. So they revamped, and when they revamped, they were going to be upgrading the exams. That's when they introduced enterprise infrastructure, and there was a lot of questions going on. I thought I was talking to certification folks at the certification lounge at Cisco Live that I was going to be a dual CCIE just because of the fact that I already had one track. They were going to automatically migrate you to enterprise infrastructure. Or the way that they worded it was they're going to award you a new track. So if you were already writing and switching CCIE, then they were going to give you enterprise infrastructure. So I said, does that make me a dual CCIE? And the lady looked at me square in the face. She goes, yes, it will. I'm like, cool. Like, dual IE. I mean, even though it's the same track, two different terms, I guess you could call it. Well, that wasn't the case. Fast forward however long it was, and it was still it had just been migrated from routing and switching over to enterprise infrastructure. So even though my plaque says routing and switching, if you look to log in online, it says enterprise infrastructure. So that's the case with that. So what I ended up dealing with was because they made this announcement in 2019. They made this announcement in June. Is normally when they have Cisco Live in San Diego. Well, I should say is when Cisco Live US happens. So when they did that they said Service Provider version 5 will be getting updated and will be released, and so therefore, and this was right before COVID happened, so there was actually a hard stop at some point in early 2020 where they weren't doing exams anymore. So and this was before I'd taken the test. I'm sorry, after I'd taken the test. So because I took the exam in 2019, I wasn't really ready for it, to be honest with you. I wasn't ready for it, and I knew it. I had done as much prep as I could, and so I was talking to my boss at the time, and I said, I'm not ready for it, but if I don't do something soon, I think it was April or May of 2020. It was something like that, where the exams were going to migrate from V4 to V5, which to me, when I saw the press release for what Service Provider version 5 was going to be, I had been like, I'm going to give up. But I had already sunk so much time into it. But I was like, I'm already an IE though, so I don't really need the exam. It would just be a nice to have. So I decided to just forego it and not worry about it. I can focus on other things, and by taking that pressure off of myself from studying for it, I knew I was gonna be better off in that respect. Now the drawback to that though is, and it should have been more clear to me at the time, but I was just super excited that it happened. It took me 5 attempts, 3 at Cisco Live, 2 paid, where to pass the CCIE Service Provider written exam. And that should have been a clear indicator that I was not studying as hard as I should have been. Now, here's the reason for that. The reason for that is because it's not the reason, it's an excuse. Let's be real. The excuse for that is that I had not put in the amount of time and effort, and then I was still using INE at the time for all of my service provider training. The coverage for the exam that INE had done was definitely not as detailed as it could have been. It wasn't very thorough. They had covered maybe 30% of the exam, maybe 40, and I'm So, and now I'm not trying to knock INE for the effort that was put in, because the 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 exam coverage was done, but it was done based off of what had been, like, what INE instructors, and I won't call them out by name because at this point here, that would just not be fair. If you've gone and watched any of their service provider content, the older stuff, not their newer stuff, the V4, V3 stuff, which I'm not even sure you can get access to anymore. But the content was based off of what service provider exams they had taken, and they had passed the service provider exam early, and when it was easy, because the reality of it is, anytime a new CCI track is released, the first version is always the easiest. Ask anybody that's taken version data center or collaboration version 1, and they'll tell you that. I know plenty that have taken both, and they've all told me the same thing. Take the exam the first time, or the first version that comes out, so it's the easiest before they get smart and make it harder, or new features come out. But anyway, I digress. So the training that I was taking wasn't thorough enough, and I wasn't putting in, I was expecting lay out the red carpet like they had done for routing and switching, the premier track that everybody had gone after. Well, that wasn't the case. So, long story short, I sat for the exam, and I got, within the first few minutes, I knew I'd failed, because I couldn't solve any tickets. And it wasn't like the topology was very difficult, but I didn't know MSDP as well as I needed to. I didn't know MPLS VPN as well as I needed to. I didn't know multicast VPN as well as I needed to. And so I was like, crap. So again, just sit there, take notes, try to understand what's going on. So diagnostics was the only thing that I had passed. I guess I'm good at sussing through details in documentation, because every time I've taken a CCI Lab attempt, I've always passed the diagnostic section. So I'm good at diagnosing problems, apparently. I'm just not very good at fixing them. Anyway, so the next thing that I did was I took the exam on a Friday, and Sunday morning, Monday night, sometime between Sunday and Monday, the exam results came out, and I failed. And I knew I was going to fail. I just wanted the confirmation. So I said, you know what? I'm giving up. There's no point in me trying this, because they're just going to redo the exam, and it's going to be a whole bunch of new. There was a big push for segment routing and a big push for XR9Ks, and I did not have the ability of labbing those up, or at the time anyway. So I gave that up, and I figured I would just focus on VMware technologies, and I was going to try to pivot my focus from Cisco to more VMware stuff, and it worked out for the most part. I learned a lot about data center. I learned a lot about NSX. Became really good at both. Focused on data center technologies. Learned about Nexus 9Ks and all that good stuff that goes along with it. So the big thing that I'm doing now is I always need something to sink my teeth into, or something for me to put my time and effort into, because I can't just sit on my computer at home and watch YouTube videos or, putz around. So I'd always wanted to do an enterprise infrastructure series and just cover the entire the entire blueprint very thoroughly, or at least as thoroughly as I could, and that's what I started doing. So that was the reason behind the enterprise workbook. So, and then, as you guys have seen, for those of you that have purchased it, I appreciate the support. It's done pretty well. So while I was doing that, I started to get the itch for MPLS. It's like, well, standing up MPLS VPNs, I can do it in my sleep. I've done so many MPLS VPN deployments that it's easy. Getting them up and running is a piece of cake. So, but I started getting the itch again. Like, oh well, maybe it's time for me to go after another track. So I was like, well, maybe I should go after DE. DE sounds like fun. Do design, that'd be cool. But then service provider feels like the one that got away. So I have been steadily, not like I was with service provider, but steadily working towards going through the blueprint topics on the SP Blueprint, and taking all of the labs that I'm doing and I'm going through the blueprint topic, I'm labbing it up, and I'm dumping the outputs of the config and the show commands and the verification steps into a Word doc. So without like building a service provider workbook, the intention is to build one out just because I've tested the technology out. And I have the intention with the service provider workbook is to be identical to what the enterprise infrastructure workbook is. It is a companion product to any particular topic that you happen to be going over. So if you're learning the service provider track, the book is supposed to be built, and it's broken out. I got one section that's going to be dedicated for iOS XE and all of the different topics that go into it, and then another one where it's all the XR, iOS XR. So you'll get double coverage of the topic from two different operating systems. And I'm doing that on purpose because to me it gives me a structured approach. And instead of doing it just kind of willy-nilly, I spent a couple of hours one day. I looked at the exam blueprint, and I was split screening this. I had the exam blueprint, then I had Nick Russo's book pulled up with all the topics that he had done in his book, and then I had a spreadsheet. And what I did is I ended up building out a spreadsheet for all these different topics, and I built it out so that it would give me something to like help me keep track of where I'm at technology-wise and be more thorough in my studies. And I found that if I spreadsheet it and I put in there like read about it, labbed it up, any notes that I get hung up on something is something like that I get frustrated why this isn't working, or maybe this particular feature isn't supported, whatever the case might be, jot it down inside the spreadsheet and then move on. And so I've been doing that, and that has been extremely useful to me. And the only thing that I haven't figured out how to do is like when I fill in a topic, give it like a percentage of completion. That's something else I need to worry about. But anyway, so it's like, for example, I'll say there's 150 line items on the spreadsheet. I'm probably 40% of the way through, and it's just one of those things where I don't feel the pressure like I did for the version 4 exam, lab exam attempt, because there is no deadline. Like I don't have to worry about version 5 going to version 6. So for me, it's one of those things where I take my time, and I just lab up every topic on the blueprint. And I've got like the blueprint is like a kind of like a collapsed high-level overview of the topic scope, right? Then I had Nick's book open, and I'm like, okay, these are all the things that I'm going to need to go read up on and test out and lab. So this gives me more of an expanded blueprint. And then I've got the IP routing on iOS, XE, and XR book open as well, and I expand all the individual topics for those areas as well. And so I use two different books, one authored by Cisco Press, one authored by Nick, and that's what I've used to extrapolate and blow up my spreadsheet so that I can fill in all of my topics that I need to cover. And then what I do is I say, okay, I'm going to go through his book, and I'm going to lab stuff up, and as I have my own purpose-built topology. Topology is a topology at the end of the day, but I like to build my own so that I'm not trying to reference something that somebody else built. I can have my own topology and the configurations in them, and then I can lab something up, test it out, make sure it's working the way I expect it to, and then when it does work, and for I'm going through segment routing right now, for all the topics that I've tested thus far, everything has worked. And I've been literally, like I said, I've been taking the configuration that I apply to the device, I copy and paste it out of the router into Word, and then I take all the verification steps and copy them into Word as well. And by doing that, it gives me it'll give me a body of work by the time I'm done with the service provider track, that it'll give me all the information will be there. So, and it's not certification specific. Like I said, like for enterprise infrastructure, it's not specific to CCNA or CCIE or anything in between. It is specific to the track. So if there's a particular topic on the exam that you want to go study, here's a known good working configuration for that. And just like with, my intention with that one is to not have to do a bunch of revisions, because there's no deadline on it, right? To me, that book gets released once the blueprint is complete. So that will be coming out some point in the future. and I won't put a deadline on that, and I'm not going to be putting a demo out on that until much later on down the road. But because it's not that big of a track, it's very niche. There's not that many people going after it, so therefore the demand isn't as high. So I know it's going to be one of those things where I'm not going to have to put as much time and effort into it. So I do plan on doing a Service Provider series and going through and demoing out all the technologies and things like that. So that is going to be a time-consuming process, and it'll happen after I'm done with the Enterprise Infrastructure series. That one is still in the process of being recorded, but if you guys are waiting on that, don't hold your breath, because I still have quite a bit left to do, and I'm getting busy at work, so I'm not as able to spend as much time doing the things that I want to do. I am spending things on the stuff I have to do, so I got to pay the bills first. So there's that. So how much time did it take? On and off from 2016 to 2019, mid 2016 to late 2019. So what's that? 3.5 years, 3 years. So that's almost the same amount of time it took me to study for the route switch CCIE, but because the fact that the level of effort for the training that I was going through wasn't there, the service provider is much more difficult, way more difficult. A lot of emphasis on other things. Like I need to become an expert in multicast VPN, an expert in multicast inter-AS designs, with multiple different PIM domains and things like that. There's stuff that I have not yet ever touched, even back when I was studying for route switch, that I need to go into, and I just haven't. And so I just need to sit down and go through them and mess around with it, and probably going to learn a lot of stuff. There's still a lot for segment routing that I don't know. I don't thoroughly understand it, but it's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know, right? So you have to spend the time going through whatever it is that you're learning to make sure that when you get to that point that you don't know what you don't know because you haven't been there before. So when you hit a stumbling block and you're like, why is that way? So that you can circle back and you can take a note and be like, okay, I need to go dig into this. Why does this work the way that it does? Just for that fundamental understanding, because you get to a certain point where, like, when I recertified my CCIE a little over a year ago, I think, back in December of 2022, yes, I think is when I passed. I had to go double check though. Not that important at the moment. But when I recertified, I used SP Core to do it, because I didn't want to spend the time on Enterprise to learn wireless and DNA Center, because to me, I didn't touch it. I didn't touch Service Provider either at the time, but it was, to me, easier to pass that exam than it was for Enterprise. Next question. Do you think working as a network engineer from the desk can substitute the experience for having an implementation job where you go and deploy and implement yourself? Do you think working as a network engineer from the desk can substitute the experience for having an implementation job where you go and deploy and implement yourself? Okay. If somebody else is handling the racking, the cabling, the power, all that stuff, and then all you're responsible for doing is building a configuration, design, and a configuration, and then giving that config to somebody to put on the device once it's in the rack and do the physical, copy paste onto the hardware. That's literally all I did for the past 7 or 8 years. I would rarely ever go into the office I'd rarely ever go on site to do a deployment. And typically the only time I would actually ever go on deployment or go in to do it in person to do a deployment was when I would already have talked to the customer and would realize that their infrastructure would be down long enough, and it would just be one of those things where it would make sense for me to be there. That's it. So that would be the big thing. Or they needed somebody to go on-prem that knew what they were doing if something went sideways. Because the reality, I'll just be straight up. You get somebody that's got a CCNA and maybe 1 or 2 years of experience, and or is just a technician, right? They're just a smart hands. They're told take the device out of the box, take the shrink wrap off of it, put the ears on it, put it in the rack in this particular U level in the rack, screw it in, power it on, cable it up to whatever equipment you're going to do, and then put this base config on it, and then walk away, right? If you need somebody to be able to do more than that, most of the time, and no disrespect to anybody that's got a CCNA or has only got a couple years of experience, but someone like me is going to be able to troubleshoot through those problems. So, and I would have to. It would happen, not very frequently, but it would happen, where something would be overlooked, or something would go sideways, or there's a cabling issue somewhere, and you'd have to be like, okay, I'm tracing this particular cable from this box here to this box here. Where is it? It's like this link is not lit up. What's going on here? Do I need to swing this over? And like, yes, you do. Like, okay, cool. And so we refish the wire. And yeah, I've got an IE, but here's the thing. I can see the physical and I can understand the logical at the same time. I can look at the config and know what's going on. And to me, a lot of times that's where you win. So it's easy to draw it in Visio. Very, very easy to draw in Visio. It's a whole other thing to take a Visio, extrapolate the physical, put it logical configuration side, build the configurations for that, put it into Notepad, copy that, or send that in an email to somebody to copy and paste. But if that person can't view both the physical and logical, and then overlay the logical on top of the physical and understand what's going on, if they can't do that, then you need someone like me there to be able to do that. And I can visualize all that type of stuff. I can look at the config. The deployment engineer I would work, there's one customer I would travel every once in a while, probably once a quarter for a couple days, and he would send me the config ahead of time. He just review it, and I would look through it. It's like, okay, I know this is going to be a trunk. These two particular interfaces are going to be in a trunk link, and they're going to be going VPC up to these switches. So I would know what's going on logically, and I would understand it. I'd be able to look at it and be able to visualize this is a big VPC, this is a port channel, yada yada yada. So that's where I win as an engineer in that respect. So can you substitute the experience? I wouldn't say you could substitute it. To me they're two different experiences. So in order to be a good engineer from the desk, you have to be first an engineer that does deploy and implement yourself. Because if you can't understand the physical aspect of it, if you don't touch the hardware, put it in the rack, cable it up, all those things, if you can't figure that part out, then I don't know how you're going to do the logical piece or work from the desk. To me, the one leads to the other. The hands-on leads to the logical. So to me, the deploy and implement yourself is, typically reserved for the junior or mid-level engineer, I guess you could say, and then the work from the desk is reserved for the senior guys or gals. So in that respect, that's where I think that comes into play. But that's what makes a senior engineer able to be a senior engineer, is being able to ask the questions, hey, what's going on with this? Or direct the person that's in the data center, this is what we're doing. Right, that's the thing you got to keep in the back of your mind. Hopefully that answers that question. What is your current role? The official title is Solutions Architect. I won't really go into a whole lot more than that. You can just Google for Solutions Architect. I will be attempting the CCI EI exam in 2024 and studying daily. This is a long, uneasy journey, and that is the point. There's nothing easy about the process of going through your CCIE prep. CCIE is the hardest exam in the world in IT that I've ever taken, and as far as I've looked into it, harder than any other vendor's exams. I mean, Juniper, trying to think of who else has an expert level certification out there besides Cisco and Juniper. Not even VMware is that difficult. I mean, you have to know the platform, but it's a few hours compared to you having to travel to Cisco to take your exam, and you know, be there for 8 hours. Cisco intentionally makes it difficult. So if that's what you want to go do, hey, more power to you, man. Just remember that EI, if you were to pull out the software-defined infrastructure, is just routing and switching version 5. And if you master the topics in RNS v5, then all you gotta do is understand what you need to be able to do for, I guess, read the documentation. Maybe there's dcloud that you can access for SD access and SD WAN. Go ramp up on that, but that's such a small part of the exam. I don't know how much of that is going to be there. I think it's like 15%. So it's not a huge topic area, but it's enough to where if you don't know it, you're going to fail. So do what you got to do. Like, break it down. There's plenty of really good content out there, and hopefully that does the job. So I'll probably not be doing another. Yeah, I probably won't be doing a tech support Thursday. I'll just do it today, get it uploaded, because there was lots of really good questions. So I'll finish this one out real quick since I'm right here. Now, usually the book should be free, and the video you can charge for a fee. That's the guarantee the book is good. That's true. I did it the other way around, but hey, whatever. This one was an IPMTU thing, and I think it was the MPLS MTU. So, but I've never run GRE over MPLS. I've never had a need to. So, there's a typo here that I made. I don't know how that I missed that, but whatever. And then this guy here going into a CCNP. Anyway, so hopefully that answers all your questions. If you do have any more questions, drop a comment in the comment section below. If you haven't already done so, like, share, and subscribe. I will put a link to the I'll put 2 links in. There will be one to the demo video where you can watch the workbook demo if you want to go see a demo or a sample of the workbook. And I will also put one in there for the Patreon link to if you want to go buy the book, all that good stuff to it. So let me know if you guys have any other questions, comments, concerns, feedback. Leave all that stuff in the comment section below. And until next time, guys, take it easy.